Hi, Peter. I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. Such a pleasure to be able to speak to you today. Thanks a lot for taking the time.
My pleasure. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Maybe for people who haven't seen The Wild Robot yet, you can give us a brief intro. What can people expect coming into this film?
Well, they can expect to feel a lot of feelings. For a movie about a robot in the wilderness, you'll be surprised at the emotions that it's going to stir up, which is really fun, I think. It's about a robot named Roz who's stranded on an island, and in order to survive, she kind of studies the animals and learns how to communicate with them, and then ends up developing friends and even a family, all these relationships on this island in the middle of the ocean until her kind of mysterious past comes back to haunt her, you might say. So it sounds like a sci-fi kind of action adventure, and it is all that, but there's a surprising amount of heart and soul to the story and the characters, focused on Roz and her relationship in particular with an orphaned gosling who she adopts as her son and names Brightville. Their mother-son relationship really is the heart of the story, and makes it feel awfully relatable to, I think, parents and children and grandparents and everybody else. So it's quite a story.
And of course, before it became this beautiful film, it had a whole previous life as a much-loved book by you. So casting your mind back, what was your initial inspiration for this setting, for this character, and why did you want to write the book?
Well, I love science. I love nature and technology, and I'm an author and an illustrator, so I spent a lot of time just sketching and kind of drawing in my sketchbook. And I drew a picture of a robot in a tree years ago. For some reason, I don't know why I drew that picture, but I couldn't stop thinking about this robot I had drawn up in a tree and imagining why a robot would be in a tree or in a forest or in the wilderness, how a robot would adapt to life in the wilderness, what a wild animal might think of a robot. Those are the types of questions that kind of took over my imagination. And so I started researching robotics and artificial intelligence and animal behavior and ecology and all these interesting subjects that seem very different from each other, but I was finding surprising similarities and commonalities between them. And so I thought I had the ingredients for a really interesting children's novel about a robot who learns to survive and thrive in the wilderness and almost ends up becoming more wild than a person ever could because of her particular abilities and circumstances. And so that all turned into the first novel, The Wild Robot, which is now, there's 3 books in the series. There's 3 Wild Robot books in the series now. So, and the first book came out in 2016, 8 years ago. So it's been around for a little while. And now we get to see DreamWorks' version of that story, thanks to the director, Chris Sanders, and his whole team of incredible artists.
And when did they first approach you with this idea? And what was your first thought when you were writing it? Did you ever envisage it as a movie? And did you have Chris Sanders already attached? How did you know who were going to be the right collaborators? Because I guess you know, when it's your idea and it's your book, you have a little bit, you want to keep some ownership over that. So you want to put it into the right hands. So what was that?
Sure, yeah. Well, I love animation. In fact, I went to art school with the hope of working at a place like DreamWorks or Disney or Pixar. Art school, I took a class on children's books and realized that was actually a better fit for me, the kind of stories I wanted to tell, the kind of work I wanted to do. But I've always had this connection with animation. And I think about my stories for children as if they're almost like little animated films where I'm the writer and the director and the art director and the lighting designer and all, I do it all as one person. So I do think visually and almost in animation terms when I create my children's books. But to actually have it happen is a whole other story, right? It's one thing to imagine it. It's another thing for it to become real. And so what happened was DreamWorks, they have people who pay attention to children's publishing and kind of see what people are working on. And so they knew I was working on The Wild Robot before I had even finished writing the book. And they approached me before I even finished writing the book. But I refused to send them anything until I was done with it because I didn't want to send them something that wasn't up to my standards. So eventually I finished the story. I sent it off to them before the book was even published, and they immediately made me an offer to get the film option, but there was no director attached to it. But I knew that DreamWorks was good. They had a great track record. They'd made some great movies. I love animation, and so we signed up this deal. And it took them a few years, but eventually they got Chris Sanders to sign on as the director. And at that point, I really felt good. I felt kind of relieved, actually, to know that such a high caliber director was going to be running the show, because I didn't know who the director was going to be, but I had confidence that DreamWorks would find somebody good. But then to land on Chris Sanders was really exciting for me. And so then I got to know Chris. We had a lot of Zoom meetings like we're doing right now here throughout the whole filmmaking process. I live in the East Coast of the States, and he lives out in, the DreamWorks studios out in Los Angeles. So I was never in the studio working on it, but we had a lot of really productive conversations about the story, about the research that I went into writing the book that I did. They would pick my brain about why I made certain decisions, and really trying to understand all the thought and thinking that went into the Wild Robot novel. And then gradually over the course of years, it takes years to make an animated film. So we had meetings every couple of months, and over the years, the meetings changed over time. And gradually it was more about them showing me character designs that their team had come up with, or background art, ideas for the story, And then eventually they started showing me unfinished versions of the film. And then gradually that film, that they kept sending me more versions of the film that was gradually becoming more and more complete, until finally the film was done after years of the filmmaking process. So it was really a wild journey from the idea for the Wild Robot that I had years and years ago. Probably 2008 was when I had the initial idea for the Wild Robot, to then publishing the book, and then now having the movie come out. It's been a lot, but it's been really exciting.
And one of the things that really stands out to me is, I don't know, a lot of animated films, you can sort of feel like, there's just like something different happening every moment. And there's just something maybe more old school about this. Maybe reminds me of some of the films that I grew up watching, in terms of that combining that painterly animation and very sort of music led in terms of the emotion of the film, with that more sort of modern computer animated design. And I think that's also there in the themes of the film, and you really are drawn into it, whether you're an adult, whether you're a child, about these concepts of parenthood, about these concepts of adapting and wanting to belong in a community. So, what do you hope people take away from watching the movie?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, they need to enjoy it, right? Or else the sort of process has failed. So I hope they have fun. I hope they feel feelings. I think they will. I'm pretty confident that people are going to walk out of the movie theater or wherever they're watching it, especially the first time they see it, be a little surprised at the stuff that it stirs up inside of them. I know when I've sat at movie theaters watching the film a few times now, at different points in the movie, you'll hear people crying, sobbing, sniffling, like, there's real juicy stuff that the story explores. And I love that. I just think, why not? Why not have a movie that makes you laugh and literally makes you cry also? And there's action and there's adventure, but there's quiet moments. There's family drama. There's everything. The movie kind of checks every box, and I'm so proud of that it does so, because that was what I was trying to do with the book. When I wrote The Wild Robot, the first novel in the series, I was like, how can I make people care? How do I pull on people's heartstrings? This is a robot in the wilderness. How do I make sure readers of different ages are really going to care about this character? And so I did everything I could to, between her family life and her struggles with survival and her trying to fit into this community that doesn't really want her at first. I found all these different ways of making the story relatable, and I was so thrilled to see the filmmakers basically focusing on all those same themes. And so it's a beautiful movie that I think people they're really gonna feel like they just watched something special when they're finished with it.
The voice cast as well. I mean, Lupita right at the center of it. So incredible. The way her voice evolves as well throughout the film as well.
Absolutely.
And then you got Pedro Pascal, and you've got Kit Connor and Bill Nye. I mean, must really a dream cast list to be voicing your characters.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know. When we signed this whole thing up, I didn't know who's going to be the director. I didn't know who's going to be the voice actors. Anything could have happened, or the movie might have never been made at all. That was a very real possibility. So the fact that it got made with such a stellar cast, and with Chris and Jeff Herman, the producer, and all the creative leads, like the team was top notch. I mean, I couldn't have asked for anything more. Lupita was amazing, and all the cast did such an outstanding job that, as an author and illustrator like me, I couldn't have possibly asked for anything more.
And very quickly, if there are more books, are going to be more films, or are you working on some completely different projects as well in tandem?
Well, there's currently three books in the Wild Robot series. I think I'm going to write probably another one or two. We'll see if any, get turned into other movies. There's definitely talk about a sequel. The second book in the series is called The Wild Robot Escapes. And I know that Chris Sanders, the director, and Jeff Herman, they both are hoping to make that into a movie. and a lot of the people involved are really hoping to get to make that into a movie, but it hasn't actually been decided yet. So we'll have to just cross our fingers and hope that it gets the green light. I'm writing all sorts of other stuff too, so I'm a pretty busy guy these days between the Wild Robot stuff, illustrating other books by other authors, and writing some new children's novels that are unrelated to the Wild Robot. I got my hands full, so it's an exciting time for me, for sure.
Thanks so much for sharing all that with me. Congratulations on the book and the film. And can't wait for everyone else to see it. My 4-year-old loved it, by the way. So
Oh, good. That's great. Well, thanks so much. This was a lot of fun.